You know what's better than games that don't cost money? Games that do cost money. With all the free-to-play trash out there that's full of microtransactions, it can be pretty hard to find a good free-to-play game worth your time.
In this episode alone, we are going to spend $500 worth of gems.
Luckily, I'm here to tell you that I found a game that's definitely worth your time. I actually first learned about the Trackmania series when Trackmania 2020 came out, and then I learned that Trackmania Nations was free to play and I'd never even heard of the series before. I decided to download the game since it looked like the kind of game I would enjoy. It turns out that this is the best free-to-play game I've ever played and I hadn't even heard of it before. This game isn't exactly a looker even for its time back in 2008. But the Trackmania series isn't about graphics, it's about its extremely polished gameplay and amazing track design. The game is extremely simple yet super deep and precise with how it controls. The only controls are the arrow keys with an optional horn button and 3 different viewpoints. There's no drift button per se from something like the Burnout series, but you can do things like air brake in midair to level out your car and drift if you brake while turning. If I had to describe this game's feel, I would describe it as a sim-style racer modeled after a track car, since it has the weightiness of a sim, but arcadey in that you can hold extremely fast lines without spinning out. The controls are twitchy yet still weighty, which kinda gives it this middle feeling of not quite arcade and not quite sim. The game is designed primarily around speed and holding racing lines as you go through tight turns and obstacles. It's a game that demands perfection since the slightest mistouch can send your car flying off the course. This game does have an online mode and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but the gameplay loop for me was chasing all the gold medal times in the single player mode. There are 5 different course styles in the single player mode, with race, endurance, obstacle, speed, and acrobat, with each mode having you race against an AI opponent. And you get to choose how fast the AI opponent goes by choosing either the bronze, silver, or gold medal times, which are the times you have to beat in order to beat the opponent. The incentive for getting gold medal times is that you have to obtain a certain amount of medals before you can move on and unlock the next stage of tracks. The only thing that separates the 5 different course styles is that in race you have your standard 1-lap race, endurance is a multiple lap race, obstacle has pillars and obstacles in your way that you have to dodge, speed courses are designed to where you never have to brake if you do them right, and acrobat courses have you perform some kind of trick or multiple series of tricks during the race. I would say that the acrobat style of races is the only unique mode that shakes up the gameplay a bit. Even though it is a race, the trick element in the race is unique to that race style. Although I'm not sure how much more they could have done, since adding something like online multiplayer with collision detection would just be pure chaos. Going back to this game's depth a bit, in one of the acrobat races I learned that you can air brake in the air after about 2 hours of playing the game, which actually helped a lot in certain tracks later on. Although I don't think it helped too much since this game is really hard to get good times on, and this is basically the gameplay loop summed up in a nutshell. And if the game isn't hard enough already, there's also different surfaces that each have a different level of grip that you have to account for. Concrete is super grippy, so you can go fast while maintaining your racing line and do predictable drifts that don't launch you off the course as easily. The dirt tracks, it's a bit harder to control, but as long as you take the turns wide, you should be able to maintain a good level of speed. And then the grass tracks pretty much feel like ice. There's also things like slopes, loop-de-loops, vertical walls, and ramps, and each of them have their own little nuances that you have to adjust your steering for. And lastly, there's the freewheel surfaces where you can't accelerate, so you have to try and keep your momentum as much as possible, which means finding the perfect racing line is even more important here. This game's track design is amazing, and you can tell that the developers really thought about every turn when they were making the tracks. And you definitely have to know the tracks, because if you don't know what line you're gonna take next, the game punishes you for it. For example, on specific tracks, you have to know which angle you're gonna launch off of a ramp at in order to get the best time, or else you'll just fly off the air and do random spins into nothingness, and then the game will tell you that you did a trick almost as if it's taunting you for failing.
Perfect!
Each track felt similar to a speedrun, and that you have to perfect the track before being satisfied enough to move on to the next one, which in my case turned out to be whenever I got the gold medal time. Speaking of speedrunning, you should also check out my video I made on the topic. Segue. I literally just got straight up addicted to the game and played it for the rest of the night, and then I lost track of time because I started around 7 and just kept playing until 12 when I decided to go to bed because I had school in the morning. Then I had a dream about the game that night, no biggie. Woke up the next day and played until I finished the rest of the levels. The level progression escalates very nicely, since at the beginning I could beat most levels in only a few minutes, but later stages would take me up to 30 minutes to get the gold medal times. What's weird is that I never got frustrated even after crashing so many times on one level. It has a similar feel to Super Meat Boy in that the restarts are instant, and every time you fail it's completely your fault since the controls are so tight. Once you unlock your first stage in the Black Cup level, which you get by getting 150 medals total, you unlock Nadeo medals, which are even faster times than the gold medals, to incentivize you to go back and master the tracks even more. Now I'll get into a few negatives with the game. The soundtrack is pretty good and gets the job done, but I'm always more of a fan of hardcore rock in my racing games, like in Burnout. I did check out the online racing mode on a random server with a custom track, but I preferred the single player against the ghost AI trying to get through all the gold medal times, since the online mode looked like an early internet screen that was super overwhelming since it wasn't organized at all and I didn't know where anything was or what it meant. The online mode does have tons of tracks made by the community, but the 65 single player tracks were just so finely crafted that I wanted to just keep racing them over and over again. This next thing might just be me, but I wish there was an option to keep your car in third person view even during the acrobat sections where it forces you into the first person camera perspective. I'm sure the developers did that because it's probably just easier to see where you're going and get your bearings since you're going upside down and everything, but if they perfected the camera in third person, it might have been easier and more comfortable for people to play in, or at least give them the option to use. And my final complaint is that this game will give you carpal tunnel. Since you're so engaged and constantly making so many fast tiny little button presses with your clenched hand, coming off the game, your hand looks like a crushed spider. This is why I reassigned the keys to WASD and arrow keys so that when my right hand was tired and all stiff, I could just switch to my left hand and use the WASD keys. You could mitigate this problem by using a controller, but I feel like you'd lose some of the precision you have with the arrow keys. Trackmania Nations Forever feels like a Flash game that had a budget, but I don't mean that in a negative way. It's extremely simple and easy to play, but super deep and precise. This is definitely my favorite free-to-play game I've ever played, besides the time I went through my League of Legends phase that lasted about 3 years back in high school. It's rare for me nowadays to find a game or game series I've never heard of, since I keep up with gaming news so much nowadays, so I feel like I know what to expect from everything releasing. so I'm glad that I discovered this game out of nowhere and it turned out to be one of my favorite free-to-play games of all time. I obviously highly recommend this game, and it's free to play so you don't really have anything to lose if you want to try it out. I'm glad that this channel has pushed me to try older games or just games I wouldn't normally play in general, so if you like what you're seeing, make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know what your favorite free-to-play game is down below.